What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. This is your boy Frankie Bones, and in today's video we are going to be talking about the 2023 NCAA Men's March Madness Tournament. Going to be showing you guys a breakdown of my bracket, showing you guys who I think is going to win, who is going to get some upsets in the coming days. Games starting on Thursday, March 16th and 17th for the round of 64. And obviously action going on later tonight as I'm recording this on Tuesday for our play-in games. Also at the end of the video, I'm going to include some best bets. Now, I'm not a college basketball expert by any means, so definitely don't take my picks for law, as well as for the bracket. These are obviously fun things that we like to do with friends, family, coworkers, things like that. Obviously going for the perfect bracket, but as we see every year, upsets come in many shapes and forms, so I don't imagine that we're going to get it 100%, but we're going to do our best to predict what we think is going to happen. So, just a quick disclaimer before we get too deep into the video. Again, at the end of this video, there will be talks of gambling. So if you or anyone that you know is struggling with a gambling problem, please reach out to 1-800-GAMBLER or reach out to your state's individual gaming board, and they'd be happy to provide you with some additional resources to help you with any of these troubles you may be running into. So, let's kick things off and let's get into this bracket. So I'm not going to go too in depth just because I want to keep this video a little bit quicker, but we will go through. Just as a general background, I went to Syracuse University, so I watch a lot of ACC basketball, as well as my family being, in particular my dad being a big Rutgers fan, so I also watch a lot of Big Ten basketball as well. So to kick things off, we'll start in the South region. Pretty square, I feel like, across the boards outside of one upset. I have Alabama advancing. I have Maryland beating West Virginia. Just a Big Ten thing. I think the conference is stronger. They do have some quality wins as well under their belt. But the one upset that I really do have at the beginning of this bracket is that I have Charleston beating San Diego State. Charleston is a team that was in the top 25 at the beginning of the year. I feel like they might be able to pull an upset here. Always love a nice 5-12. Another matchup to look for here is Virginia and Furman. A lot of people saying that Virginia are kind of fraudulent, which I think they might be a little bit, but we'll get a little bit into that later on, talking about some of our bets. I have Creighton moving on over NC State, Baylor over UC Santa Barbara, Missouri advancing over Utah State, and Arizona beating Princeton. Moving on to our next round, I have Alabama moving on as the number 1 overall seed. Really good team with Brandon Miller as well, looking pretty strong. I have Virginia beating Charleston. I have Creighton beating Baylor. Baylor, again, a pretty interesting team. They don't defend too well, and they do have some good wins, obviously out of the Big 12, a really strong conference, but Creighton was also a really good team at the beginning of the year. Sort of lost form a little bit, but I think they might be able to bounce back in the tournament and shock some people. And then I have Arizona moving on. Alabama-Virginia matchup in the Elite Eight. I will take, or in the Sweet 16 rather, I have Alabama beating Virginia, and I have Arizona beating Creighton, with Alabama ultimately coming out of the bracket to represent the South region. Moving on to the Midwest region. Again, relatively square coming out of here as well. I have Houston advancing. I have Iowa beating Auburn. Again, just Big Ten bias. I think they shoot the three very well, so they definitely could put up a lot of points. I have Miami beating Drake. Obviously, this is a pretty popular upset choice here. With Miami having the veteran guards, I just don't really think that's going to happen. A lot of people really high on Drake. But if a lot of people are talking about it, it most likely won't happen. I have Indiana beating Kent State, another team that people think are going to be able to upset some teams in the tournament. But I just like Indiana again, Big Ten. I have Iowa State beating whoever comes out of the play-in games later tonight. I have Xavier advancing over Kennesaw State. Penn State, actually the only one true upset I really have here early on, beating Texas A&M. Penn State really caught fire leading into the Big Ten tournament and advancing on to the championship round, which really boosted them into the tournament for sure. So I'll take Penn State, and then I have Texas beating Colgate. Moving on to the next round, I have Houston over Iowa. I have Miami over Indiana. I have Xavier over Iowa State and Texas over Penn State. Moving on down, again, Houston, a really, really strong team. If Sasser is able to come back and be healthy, that is a major, major piece for them. So fingers crossed for that, and it'll be a big part of them trying to make this run. So I have them beating, or I have Miami over Indiana. Yep, already went through those, obviously. Going crazy, obviously, here, filling out all these brackets. I have Houston over Miami to advance to the Elite Eight, and I have Texas over Xavier. And interestingly, I actually have Texas coming out of this bracket in the Midwest. Something about Texas, I don't know. There's just some sort of weird feel around that team. I think that they're pretty strong. They're long. And overall, again, the Big 12 is a really strong conference. They beat Kansas twice. They beat Baylor. They beat a team like Creighton, Iowa State, Kansas State, who's a really strong team we'll get to in a little bit. TCU twice. So I just think that Texas might be over to overwhelm just a little bit. And I have them coming out of the Midwest. All right, so moving down to the bottom half of the bracket, we will start with the East region. Looking across the board, we have two upsets here coming in. Starting from the top, I have Purdue advancing. I have Memphis advancing over FAU. I have Duke moving on. Oral Roberts, another popular upset pick, but I think this Duke team is really rolling towards the end of the season. Obviously went on to win the ACC championship, or the ACC tournament, and just don't really see that happening. Oral Roberts a great offense as well, but just don't have them advancing here in this bracket. I have Tennessee over Louisiana. One of the first upsets that we see here in the bottom half of the bracket, I have Providence moving on over Kentucky. Just something about it, I don't know. Just feels like a down year for Cal and his guys, and we'll just ride with Ed Cooley. So we have Providence moving on. I have Kansas State beating Montana State. I have USC moving on over Michigan State. Tom Izzo, known as a massive March guy. I have them taking a first-round exit. And I have Marquette beating Vermont, team that shoots the ball really well. Marquette not great defensively, but I just think that their offense has looked really good as of late. I have Purdue moving on over Memphis, Duke beating Tennessee and Rick Barnes. I have Kansas State moving on over Providence, and I have Marquette beating USC. As we keep going on here, we see another upset here. I have Duke beating Purdue. Purdue's just a weird team. I feel like, Zach Edey will always get his, and there's really no way of denying that. He's probably going to be the player of the year, in my opinion. He's just an absolute monster, but I think Duke is going to be able to play around that, try and limit the other players around him. And although he may end up getting, 25 points, 20 boards, I think this team is talented enough to be able to take them down. And Purdue, a lot of people feel like, is another one of those teams that is very upset prone and is a team that might be a little bit fraudulent coming down the stretch. They definitely weren't invulnerable throughout the season. And from the bottom half of the bracket, I have Kansas State beating Marquette. Because why not? I don't know. It's fun. Big 12. And then I have Duke coming out of that region as the 5 seed. The first year with John Shire. Very, very interesting indeed. Script writers have us in for us this tournament. So moving on to our last region out of the West, I have, pretty square picks, I would say, across the board here. Outside of a few matchups, I have Kansas moving on. I have Illinois moving on. A lot of Big Ten. Yeah, whatever. You can put that in the comments down below. But they weirdly have a really good team, Illinois, I think, and they're hot and cold. But I think that in this matchup, they're able to move on over Musselman and the boys. Moving on down, I have St. Mary's. Some people like VCU, but they did and always do have a pretty formidable team. They were ranked at the beginning of the season, and I think that they're going to be able to take care of a VCU team out of the A10. I have UConn beating Iona, which is a big matchup there. I think that moving on down, TCU is going to take care of whoever comes out of the playing game. So if you haven't noticed, I don't have anybody who came out of the playing game winning any games here in my bracket. So let me know in the comments down below if you guys are fans of any of these teams or if you think that they're poised to make a run. I have Gonzaga moving on over Grand Canyon, Northwestern over Boise State, and UCLA over UNC Asheville. Moving on down here from there, I have Kansas moving over Illinois. I have UConn moving on over St. Mary's. Gonzaga moving on over TCU. And a little bit of an upset, Northwestern over UCLA. UCLA a little bit banged up. And Big Ten bias, I'll give it to Northwestern. The journalists are going to love that, the big J's, but what are you going to do? I'll give it to them. Got to pick some upsets here and there. Don't have too many high seeds moving on too far, which obviously maybe I should, but whatever. It's my bracket. Get over it. So then at that point, I have Kansas beating UConn, and I have Gonzaga beating Northwestern, with Kansas ultimately coming out of the bracket for the West region. Now moving on to our Final Four matchups. We have Alabama going up against Duke, as well as Texas going up against Kansas. So from the top half, or the left side of the bracket, we have Alabama and Duke. Here I have Alabama as the number 1 overall seed. I think they've looked really well. I think that this has been a great run for Duke, but we're going to have them bow out here. Alabama with Brandon Miller, best player in the country. Skill set wise, player of the year will probably be Zach Edey, but I'm going to give this one to Alabama. And then on the other side, we have Texas going up against Kansas. And in this matchup, it's a rematch. They've played each other 3 times on the season. So pretty interesting to see them square off for a 4th time. Now, Texas has won this matchup 2 of the 3 times, but I think Kansas will be able to tie this thing up here. Some of their players that didn't play well in the previous game are going to show up and show out. And I'll take Kansas over Texas. A little bit square. I have 2 number 1 seed in the final. Again, it's my bracket. Don't care. So I'm going to take Kansas actually to win. Repeat back-to-back champions. It's a little bit weird. Bill Self will hopefully be back for the tournament, dealing with some health issues, unfortunately, during the Big 12 tournament. But just feel like it's something the guys will ride around. Kansas has a guy with the last name Dick, so that's also funny. And yeah, there just isn't really a few clear-cut teams that I think I can see winning. So in that regard, I kind of don't want to look too far, because when there's not clear favorites, there's not clear teams that everybody's going to be picking for. Obviously, Kansas is a top team up to this point. Obviously, Kansas being a number 1 seed, they are, presumably one of the favorites, but I would say mentality-wise, I don't think that there are clear picks. People saying these top 2 teams will definitely win. I think it's relatively open. Could easily see Kansas beating being beat by Texas, rather, for a third time on the season, and then moving on, maybe being able to make a run. Maybe McConaughey shows up, and the boys are gassed. You could even see somebody like Duke coming out and winning. It's sort of just hard to tell. Houston, obviously, there's a 1 seed, one of the favorites to win. But who knows? Maybe even Kansas State can make a run. This Gonzaga team at 3 is dangerous. But with that, let's move on to some of our best bets that we have for this March Madness bracket. So I have for you guys 8 different picks, a couple championships, and a couple rounds as well, with some pretty good odds, obviously, as they are with the tournament. You never know what can happen, and you hope that your teams avoid the madness. So for my 3 championship picks, I have Kansas, obviously the team that I think is going to win it all, at plus 1,200. This is before the tournament starts, so this is always where you will get your best value. I'll take them at plus 1,200. Another team that I think that could really win it, that I sort of alluded to a minute ago or so, Gonzaga at plus 1,500. This is a team that hasn't been at the top like they usually have been over the past decade or so, obviously coming in as a 3 seed. Coming out of the West, I think their bracket's pretty interesting, and they could definitely get out of this region if, say, maybe UConn's able to beat Kansas, maybe Gonzaga does it. Who knows, but I think they have a pretty decent road of plus 1,500. And with Texas, I have them at plus 2,000. Pretty good value play. Obviously, this group is pretty difficult in the Midwest, but you never know. Maybe some matchups go the right way, and maybe Houston loses. Maybe they're able to beat a team like Houston, but at plus 2,000, I think it's pretty good value. And you never know if somebody interesting is able to come out of the bottom. If Gonzaga comes out, if Kansas comes out, if an injured team like UCLA is able to come out, obviously a lot of people writing them off, including myself, but you could also see Texas as well at plus 2,000. So moving on to a few Elite 8 bets. I have Duke making the Elite 8 at plus 420. Looking at their road, it looks like they definitely could get it done. Oral Roberts, Tennessee, and Purdue. Could definitely see that happening. Obviously, Purdue a little fraudulent. Tennessee always a little bit iffy when it comes to the tournament. And Oral Roberts, which definitely might be a good test for them in round 1, but definitely could propel them on further in this tournament. The next one I have is Gonzaga making the Elite 8. I really love this bet. Personally, looking at their road, they would have to beat Grand Canyon, TCU, and Northwestern, all of which I think that they can do. And even at 2-1 odds, I like this, even if it's just a parlay piece with some other bets that you guys have in. Another bet that I have is Creighton to make the Elite 8. So we head back up to the South region. Back up to the South. That's funny. But looking at them to make the Sweet 16 is actually pretty interesting. So their first matchup against NC State, I think that they can take care of business, although they're a really tough ACC team. Obviously seen Syracuse play them twice, I think, but some other teams as well, they were ranked throughout the year. And then they would have to take down Baylor, sort of just relying on Baylor being frauds, and a plus 390, I think it's pretty good value for me. Now moving on to 2 Sweet 16 bets. A little bit of more long shots, but I think definitely could happen. So the first one, with incredible value, is Charleston to make the Sweet 16 at plus 630. Now, this is obviously a long shot, and definitely bet responsibly on this one. But in theory crafting, tinfoil hat, Charleston, if they're able to beat San Diego State, and let's say we get another upset with Furman, Charleston then can beat Furman, move on to the Sweet 16, and boom, you have hit your plus 630. I think it's pretty good odds, and it's worth a little bit of a flyer. if both teams are able to get the upset done. I like Charleston in that matchup. And the last best bet that I will give you guys here for the tournament is Northwestern to make the Sweet 16 at plus 440. To get this done, they'll have to beat Boise State and UCLA. UCLA a little bit banged up, and I think that Northwestern has played a lot of teams really tough in the Big Ten. 4-1 versus top 25 teams. They were able to beat a team like Purdue. Obviously a little fraudulent, but at the same time, still a really strong win. That was at home. They were able to sweep Indiana, beat them twice. They beat Illinois. They beat Michigan State on the road. They beat a team like Iowa. They beat Rutgers. So, obviously Rutgers in the NIT, which is a bummer, but I think this team has some good quality wins, and I think that they might be able to knock off UCLA, and they ultimately have pretty good value on the sports books at plus 440. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. Let me know down in the comments below who you guys have winning your March Madness brackets, what matchups you think I have completely wrong, what upsets you guys have, who you guys root for, who you guys are pulling for, and what best bets you guys have for the tournament. But for now, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Appreciate all the support. If you're still here at this point in the video, please feel free to drop a like on this video. It really helps with the algorithm. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already for more sports and Call of Duty content in the near future. But that is going to do it. This has been your boy Frankie Bones, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video. Peace out.